If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, or the times they are a-changing.
Hi. Besides this being a very nice song, there's another very good reason for having this song. It does capture the essence of the presentation. You better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, because the times, they are a-changing. There are quite a few things that led to Unilever making use of consumer communities within an R&D organization. They're both on the industry level, but also on the company level. The changes in the industry can be summarized in three separate parts. I think a big change is crossing the borders. With that, I mean that you see that different techniques are being merged together. There's a large holistic approach of consumer research. Where in the old days you had a big discussion between qualitative research and quantitative research, you see that nowadays with social media, mobile technology, but also ethnography and other new techniques, all of them are being merged together. And as a researcher, you need to understand them all. You need to be able to work and jump across the different modes, basically. Second one is to engage and inspire stakeholders. I think that's very important across the whole industry. It cannot be a simple delivery of a data or a PowerPoint presentation. You need to make sure that you take your stakeholders along with you in the story, that you involve them, that you make them enthusiastic. You need to give them the reason, basically, for your existence. Then you have the call to action, very important. You need to make sure that you follow up with clear next steps. I think those are the changes that you see in the industry. Also within Unilever, there was a big change going on. There was a reorganization earlier this year, where the R&D site in the Netherlands, in Vlaardingen, restructured itself. It was a big laundry facility developing laundry products for all over the world. That unit moved to India, and Vlaardingen was going to focus on multiple categories for the development of products for Europe only. So it's the hair category, it's the skin category, spreads and dressings category, and the laundry category, and the machine dishwash category. That makes sense. It makes the organization a lot more flexible and efficient. But also it has an effect on the people. Just think of Anita. She has been working in the laundry category for over 10 years. She knows exactly what type of fragrance people want in India. She knows exactly that a white shirt is very important for consumers in India. She knows exactly what color the powder detergent needs to have to be able to communicate that it is functional and effective. Now she's being asked to work on a completely different category, skin category. She knows nothing about skin, and she realizes that she has to learn what the consumer drives. She has to learn the consumer habits. But she just does not know where to start. And that has an effect on her enthusiasm and on her delivery. So that's when the consumer insight function came in. We were being asked to help in a very short time change the mindset of an organization, of the R&D organization, and take them along with the changing category. The reason to do that is not by just showing data and conclusions. We actually want to bring the R&D community along with us. We want to bring them to the consumer. We want to have an effect on their hearts and minds and actually change their behavior by doing so. So not by just showing data, but by involving them. Also an important aspect is that everyone in the R&D organization had a shared responsibility of owning a consumer insight. It's not just one department that is coming up with the insights. Everyone in the organization has a responsibility there. From the finance department, from the formulation department to the packaging department. So we made sure we involved everyone in this project. We basically brought the consumer into Unilever. And we gave the consumer a place at the table where decisions are being made. I would like to show a short video with the details of the project. Please have a look at the video.
How can one engage and inspire a complete R&D organization with consumer insights? Bring the consumer to the table and create engagement in a fun way. How? By setting up online communities that facilitates the dialogue and connects both worlds. An online consumer community with 90 UK consumers. An online employee community with 640 R&D executives of Unilever Vlaardingen to share consumer insights. 3 stepstones towards developing more impactful products. Engage. Meet the consumer. The R&D executives meet their consumer on the consumer page. This is David. Inspire. Play the consumer game and earn badges. R&D executives play games about their consumer and UK consumers in general. Act. Find the knowledge gaps. Based on the score of the games, knowledge gaps are identified. Close the gaps and learn new consumer insights. The gaps are closed by starting new discussions in the consumer community. R&D executives can ask questions as well. What did Unilever learn from Consumer and You? Consumer and You engages managers with consumers and their daily lives. Consumer and You triggers conversations with colleagues and people in their direct environment. Consumer and You triggers to start observing competitor brands and consumers' buying decision. Are you ready to engage with your consumer? Become inspired and translate it into actions. Become the next consumer superstar.
I would like to introduce Tom, who will explain the details of the different steps in this project. Tom, are you there?
Yes, Tom. Absolutely ready for it.
Please go ahead.
So I will now take you through the different steps of the project that we conducted at the Vlaardingen plant and that you already saw in the movie, but into a little bit more detail. The project mainly had 3 steps. The first one was engaging the R&D employees with the consumer world. In the second step, we inspired them to ask questions to real consumers. And finally, we let them act upon what they have learned. How did we do that? Well, it all started with recruiting 100 UK consumers. Why UK consumers? Because it was the goal to let them fill out consumer diaries. Consumer diaries with pictures, movies, and stories about their day-to-day life. So it was just very easy to have it in English because the R&D plant in Vlaardingen has a lot of people who come from abroad and who work here in the Netherlands. We also dived into the archives of the CDI department in Vlaardingen and looked at eye-opening facts that come from studies they did in the past. Studies about the 3 product categories that Stan was talking about earlier. So what did we do with the new, fresh data coming from the consumer diaries and, let's say, all the eye-opening facts coming from past research? Well, we brought it together, we mixed it together into a game, a quiz, if you like. A quiz of 10 to 15 questions that we did over a period of 3 weeks' time. So 3 quizzes, each about one of the product categories that need to be implemented at the Vlaardingen plant. The quizzes consisted out of a mix of questions about consumer behavior in general, related of course to the product categories, and also the stories and questions about the day-to-day life of the UK consumers. Because each individual R&D employee was linked to one individual consumer that they needed to answer questions about, and this again over the 3 consecutive weeks. To make this fun, to make this engaging, we gave the R&D employees points and badges if they played the games well, if they answered the questions well. We had a leaderboard within the company, so you could compare yourself with your neighbor, with people from other departments. And we also had a leaderboard not only on that individual level, but also on a department level. So we really made it a competition also between departments. So people started encouraging one another within a department to play the games well, to do well in these quizzes. That was the first part of this project, 3 weeks of quizzes. What did we have afterwards? Well, we had a very good view on what are the things that people know about consumers and what are the things that the R&D employees don't know about consumer behavior when it goes about the categories that they needed to work on from that day. Based on those knowledge gaps, we started a second part of the project. We again invited those 100 consumers, UK consumers, into a research community of 3 weeks. So a platform on which they all could talk with us, with the people within the R&D plant in Vlaardingen, and with one another. And we talked about those knowledge gaps. We tried to close those knowledge gaps by letting those consumers talk about those specific issues. And we also gave the R&D employees the opportunity, inspired by the kind of positive disruption we created in the game, to ask questions to consumers directly. And how did we report about what was happening in the community? Well, we thought we have a community that is always on for 3 weeks. Why not have a reporting system that is also there for 3 weeks? And we launched a news website within the company. A news website on which every single day there were 2 news stories. 2, let's say, pieces of reporting, pieces of information, directly, almost in real time, coming from the consumer community. So that was the project. 3 weeks of games and 3 weeks of community. In the games we created positive disruption, we identified the knowledge gaps, and in the community and the news website, we closed the knowledge gaps. And we started to inspire and let employees act based upon what they have learned. Very nice projects, 6 weeks. In 6 weeks of time, we tried to change the mindset within the company. But did we succeed? That's of course the real question. We measured 3 things to measure our success. Objective measures, like how many people participated in the games, how many people logged on to the news website. We also did a pre and post measurements to see how we evolved on certain variables. And last but not least, we did in-depth interviews with people within the company, with employees, to see what really happened on the work floor. So what were the results? First of all, some figures about who participated, how many people participated. Well, out of the almost 1,000 employees within the company, more than 600 participated, and 58% of them took all 3 of the games. This is really a success if you compare it with other initiatives about consumer behavior in the past within the very same plant. And why was this a success? I think because it was different, it was surprising, and we also made it fun. We gamified it. We made it a competition among individuals and between departments. What were other levels of impact that we had? Well, if we look at the pre and the post measurement, we see that we have an increase in terms of feeling close to consumers, relatively seen, of 81%. This is really huge. And why is this the case? Because people were confronted with real consumers, even with one individual partly in the games. And again, over 3 weeks of time with 100 consumers in the community to which they could ask questions. When we look at other effects that we saw within the company, we see that people started talking about this project with one another. Of course, because we made it a competition. People wanted to know how others scored in the game. People wanted to know what other people's consumer was doing that week when they need to fill out the questions about their specific consumer. And we not only saw that people started having more conversations about research, because that's what this is, within the company, they also started doing research outside of the company. They started more conversations with family and friends about why they were using specific products, why they liked specific products. So they start acting as an R&D employee even when they were walking in the real world, into the consumer world. And it's also something we noticed from the stories in the in-depth interviews when employees were talking about how they shop nowadays. They say that they now pay more attention to products, new products, what competitors are doing, how products are delivered to consumers, how products are packed. So it's really a mind shift that we see here. They start looking at what consumers do. They start looking at what competitors do, even when they are not at work. I think this project was really successful, more successful than we had ever dreamed. So the real question is, how does it come? And what are lessons from a methodological point of view that we can take to other projects, to your projects? Well, we tried to research that. And what did we find? We found that this project was successful, generated real impact, really generated that mind shift because of the fact that it confronted R&D employees with the consumer world, with questions about the consumer world, with one single individual. We also made them feel close with the consumer world because they could ask questions to consumer and observe consumers when they were in that research community. And finally, it really inspired them. It made them think. Maybe it didn't give them the final answers, but it made them think about a new category, new consumer behavior that they need to work on from that day on. And especially, it was for the first time that people were really talking about research results because they were brought to them in a totally different way. Stan, these were my takeaways. Do you have some final remarks?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah. I think it's important to note that this is not just an online technique. This is a holistic approach of different research methods that we combine to create a bigger impact, to create a bigger effect. By looking across the conventionally accepted boundaries of market research, we did discover some real white space that made a big impact on the organization. It's also important to note that this is not a standalone project. We will continue with engaging the R&D community by organizing workshops, by bringing them in contact with consumers, by rolling this out to other R&D sites. And I think for me, the most important way to visualize the effect is that one lab assistant that came to me one morning, 2 weeks after we finished this project. She had a big smile on her face, showing a product. And Stan, have a look at this product. I found this in a shop and I think it will suit perfectly our next project. And I think that's what it is all about. That you get people who are engaged, that think and that have passion. And that is the passion we need to capture for R&D. Times are changing.
If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, or the times they are a-changing.